Welcome to One of a Kind podcast. Slay that stage, your backstage pass to the minds of world champions of public speaking.
Discover the stories, the strategies, and the skills of world-class speakers and get ready to transcend your fear of public speaking and slay every stage life presents to you.
Hello, and welcome to yet another episode of Slay That Stage. This is your host Aisha Hussain, and our guest today is a leadership and communication coach who has delivered over 5,000 speeches in over 80 countries and been a guest on over 300 television and radio talk shows. He's an avid traveler who has experience in sailing, river rafting, and cycling. You name it, and he has done it. Without further ado, let me bring you the world champion of public speaking, 2005, Lance Miller. Lance, welcome to our show.
Oh, thanks for having me today.
For people who are trying to compete, especially for the world championship, that being a heavy title, what would you tell them where to begin?
Well, I think that the way you tell somebody to begin is to begin. And so many people have a dream. And to me, let me just tell you, the world championship and my path to the world championship is very much a template and path I follow in a lot of things in life. Because when I started competing, the idea of me being a world champion was something that the words world champion next to the name of Lance Miller was something I went, that's not for me. As a matter of fact, I had someone in my club tell me, you could be the world champion. And I said, I didn't even know what it was. And I said, no, I couldn't. What is it? And so when I started the whole thing, I just started speaking and I started competing and I was just having fun with it. But the thing I would just tell people is start. And this is the hard part for me, is that whenever we speak, and I think this happens in life in general, we want our ideas to be valuable. And we feel if people accept our ideas as valuable, that we're valuable. And everybody wants to be valuable to somebody else. So I'm going to put this idea out and then people go, I didn't like that. I like them better. It's like take a knife and stab me in the heart, and then because we all experience this in life where growing up, we said something stupid and everybody laughed at us, or, we raised our hand in class and gave the wrong answer. We've experienced where communication has had a negative impact on us. And so in the Toastmasters environment, that whole mental game gets kicked in where I said something and it wasn't received right. And, we have emotional, I went through all that. I went through, the struggling with who I was. So I just go, start. Now, when you start, you're going to make mistakes. And that's part of the game, is figuring out what you're good at and what you're not good at and where you need to work. And I'll just tell you what it took me 9 years to figure out. But the hardest thing in public speaking is to just be yourself and talk to the audience. And there's this whole thing. And there was I was on the front page of the National Speakers Association magazine a few months ago. It was talking about imposter syndrome. And that's where when I stand on stage, you meet me in the hallway and I'm, hi, how are you? Nice. And I'm on stage and I go, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so glad you're here. And you turn into this different personality on stage. And there's a disconnect that happens because you're not being true to yourself. You're not being true to the audience. And the best speakers I ever heard in my life were the people that were just there talking to me. And I felt like they were so authentic in their communication. They weren't dynamic and great vocal variety and fantastic gestures and all that. They were sincere and authentic. And that's what I was trying to be. But that is not something that came overnight. So where would you start? Start with your own stories. Start with your own lessons in life is what I would say.
So when you say start with your own lessons in life, but then people struggle with how much authenticity or how much of reality you want to bring it in the share. You don't want to be oversharing because that is also people struggle with. How do you decide where do you draw that line, how much you're bringing to the stage?
Well, you have 7 minutes. Okay, you got 7 minutes to make a point. That in the world champion. Now, if you're going to speak professionally, that's a whole different game. And let me just say this right up front. There are people that are world champion speakers that are not good professional speakers. And there are phenomenal professional speakers that would never, ever win the world championship. They're two different horses you ride. But the world championship gives you a lot of development and it gives you a foot in the door, and it challenges you, and it makes you better by doing the competitions. So with that, how much do you put in? There's a lot, this is my viewpoint, there's a lot of false information that's promoted. Some authority over here says something, and everybody goes, oh, well, this person says, and one of them is the UI ratio, which I completely disagree with. You count how many times you say you and how many times you say I, and you have to say you more times than say I. It's very formulaic. What matters is how you say you and how you say I. If you talk about how great I am and how bad you are, it doesn't work. I don't care how many times you say it. But if you talk about I was stupid, you probably weren't that stupid. That works really well. So if you're always lifting your audience up with the yous and using self-deprecating comments on yourself, it works really well. But anyway, so how to share it, you have to give, if you talk about something that's really real to you and really made a difference in your life, it's going to resonate with the audience. And that's compared to what I call a book report, where somebody read a book and they go, oh yeah, and they're talking about the book they read. But if somebody, I don't know, they lost their job, or they had a heartache, they had a horrible relationship, or they had an abusive relationship, or they had problems with their parents, or they had a friend that betrayed them. And that was, and the thing I always try to do as I learn, and when I do a lot of coaching in this area, what I wanted to give my audience was a solution to a confusion of life. And we all have confusions of life. And if I could figure out what things I figured out in life that made me do better, I could share that with the audience, because as human beings, I don't care where we come from, we have more in common than we do that separates us. And everybody struggles with the sense of value, or the sense of how to get along with your parents, your siblings, or feeling inadequate, or struggling to learn something, or have a boss who's oppressive, or there's all these things in life we all deal with. And if I can come up with something that can help the audience deal with their life better, that's where my thread is, and I'm trying to do. So I figure out, what did I figure out about life that helps me, and then I try to share that with the audience that'll help them.
So on that note, when you say that you figured out what helps you, along the last year's course, when I was going through the international contest, one advice I was given was, you are never the guru of your story.
That's true.
So when you say that I figured it out, how do you bring that guru in the story to make it a complete and a whole picture?
I'm glad you asked that, because nobody wants to say, let me tell you how smart I am.
Yeah.
That doesn't work very well in the speaking. So let me tell you how smart I am. No, I call it the hero of the story. And there's 3 steps in a story. The first step is, there's 3 acts. The first act is a setup, and that's where was it, when was it, who's there, sort of what's going on, what's the conflict. And then the second act are failed attempts to resolve the conflict. And that creates some dramatic tension in the story. I'm trying to handle this. And then the third act is the resolution of the conflict by the hero. And I absolutely should never be your own hero, even if you are in life. Even if you are in life, you should create another hero, because here's sort of what happens is, the audience is sitting over here, right? And you're talking to them going this way. And if the hero gives you the message, it's like the hero gives you the message, and it gives the audience the message at the same time. You're all on the same page. It's not like, I'm smarter than you, and let me tell you what the solution to this is. And the other thing is, if you do, there's usually somebody in the audience that goes, well, I figured that out a long time ago. And then it sort of defeats your relationship with that individual who learned that lesson 20 years ago. So the hero, or the guru, as you call it, does not have to be a person. They don't have to have a red cape on and a big blue S on their shirt. They come in like Superman. I was coaching a person. This is just one example. They were in Canada, actually, and they were talking about their family. There's this huge upset in their family. Everybody was upset with each other, and they were trying to handle it. And they were going to Prince Edward Island. And there's a bridge that went over to Prince Edward Island. And there was a big storm, and the ocean was just turbulent, but the bridge was steady. And he drove across, and he got out, and he was looking at these waves crashing against the bridge. And he said, that ocean's like my family. But that bridge is solid. Look at that. He goes, it's in the bedrock. And he goes, the bedrock of my family is the love we have for each other. He goes, I got on the phone right then. I called everybody. I said, we're going to get through this because of the love we have. The bridge was the hero. The bridge was the guru. It can be anything that influences you, that gives you the solution. It could be something that, your football or basketball or whatever, hockey coach here in Canada, whatever your coach said when you were a kid, told you this lesson and you remembered that, or something your grandparents said, or you read it in a book, whatever. But it just needs to be something on the outside that influences you, and you take that and you apply that at that point in life. And then that becomes the solution. And so you need to set that up so there is an outside influence on it, and that makes it very acceptable to the audience then, because they sort of have the realization as you do.
So, on the note of realization, I'm going to ask you, you said it took you multiple years to get to that world stage, and for district 4 times, 9 times in club. When I didn't place at district, my first reaction for first 3 minutes was, I'm done. I'm never doing this again, not putting myself through this, because it takes a lot of practice, like multiple times delivering the same speech again and again and again. How do you develop? And I read where you said somewhere that I'm going to come back again and again, even if it takes me, I am 70 and I'm still going to win it. How do you come up with that resilient mindset? And what can you tell our audience to get that mindset?
Well, first of all, the story goes in 2005 is when I said, I get better each year. If I just don't quit, I think I can win this thing. And I'll give you my story a little bit. And that was the year I won it, but I sort of let go of trying to win it that year. That was one of the things. So I let go of I'm going to win this year. I went, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to learn from every speech. And I had a shift in mindset that year. And that's when I went all the way up. But how do you keep coming back? Well, in my early years, I didn't even think I could win district. And the story was, it took me 9 years to get out of my club. Now, at the same time, I just want to let you know, we were building my club. Toastmasters used to rank all the clubs, and we had a goal to be a top 10 club in Toastmasters. And I had 80 to 95 members in my club, and my club competition was tougher than the district competition. So there's two sides to that whole thing, not getting out of the club. But I had personal issues I was struggling with the international speech competition, because I always tried to make a really important big speech, and I lost myself in that process. I tried to make the speech bigger than me. And just to go full circle on that while I'm talking about that, the first time I won at the club, I was driving to the meeting and I had my speech in the passenger side of my car, and I'm looking at it, and I stopped at a stoplight and I said, I don't want to give this speech. And I went, I'm going to lose the contest. I go, I might as well talk about something I won if I'm going to lose the contest. And so I went in and I sketched out a speech, and I'd done 17 CCs, or not quite 17. I'd probably done 12 CCs at that time. By the time that's the Competent Communicator, the old legacy program. And so by the time I won, I was a DTM, and I'd done 17, I'd been through the basic manual 17 times. Plus I'd done a ton of speaking outside of Toastmasters. But so I sketched out a new speech and I just said, I'm just going to get and talk about what I want to talk about, because I'm going to lose the contest. And I connected with the audience so much better than everybody else that day. I won this club contest because I just talked about what I wanted to and tried to connect with the audience. And before, I was trying to be so important, I kept losing the contest. But my story is a little different than other people. There was a decision. We were talking about some of the things I've done. When I was 20 years old, I was at the university in the summer break. I was able to get on a sailboat and crew it. It was an 84-foot boat, about 60 meters. No, about 20 meters. Crew it from the Virgin Islands to Norway. So I sailed across the North Atlantic for 5,000 miles that summer. Incredible trip, changed my life. And the captain and his wife were getting ready to sail around the world 4 years later. I was 2 years out of university. I was working in my family's business in this little town in eastern Indiana. We had a milk and ice cream company, and I was driving milk trucks. And I get a letter from them that said they wanted me to be their first mate on the trip. And I would get a small stipend, but I'd have the whole trip paid for, and I get to sail around the world for 2 years. And that's what I really wanted to do. But I went, no, I'm out of school now. I've got to work, the family, I've got to be here, and I can't go do that. And I wrote them back and said, I can't do that. And then I regretted that decision so much. You don't know how much I regretted that decision, because I got letters from them going through the Panama Canal, postcards from the Galapagos Islands and from Fiji and from New Zealand. All these things. I'm just in this little town dying because I wanted to be out in the world. I wanted to be out in the world having an adventure. And I was driving milk trucks in Indiana. And I never wanted to regret anything like that again in my life. It was so painful that I missed an incredible opportunity to do something. And what happened to me is that as I started to compete and I started to win, and it's interesting, I always say the lessons are in the losing, but you have to have enough winning to keep yourself, going. You just can't have nothing but losses. You lose your motivation. But as I started to win and I kept losing, it was like 9 years to get out of the club. Then I went to district. I went to district 4 times, won at 3. I went to the regions 3 times. But what was interesting, I'd gone to the regions in 2003 or 2002, 2003, and then I came back and I lost just, at the regionals, which then I lost because I went over time 1 second. I was disqualified. I clearly won the contest, but I went over 1 second. It was disqualified. And in my mind, I was this big ego, and I'm like, I should have gone to the show last year. Everybody knows I'm a world champion speaker. I should be on the finals. I had this big ego in 2004 when I came into the contest. And I came into a division level contest with that ego. Like, I need to go to the regions and international. That's where I speak. Thanks for showing up so I can win this competition. And the guy that I always beat me. So I needed a lesson in humility. That was the truth. I needed a lesson in humility. And this is where it changed. No, it was actually the time before. I'll tell you what, I'll come back around. I didn't want to regret doing it. I thought I could win it. And to that thing, I did not want to be sitting on my front porch. And it's funny. Back then I said, when I'm 70, which I'm closer to 70 now than I was back then. And people said, that's too young, Lance. So I started saying when I'm 90. And I said, okay, that's better. I didn't want to be sitting on a rocking chair on my front porch going, I could have been a world champion speaker, but I quit. I did not want to have that conversation with myself. But Aisha, here's where it flipped for me. It was actually when I went over. It was the first time I went to regions in 2002. I thought I won the contest. Everybody at the announcements were quoting I was the last speaker. They were quoting my speech. I went, I won this. I'm going to the net. And my viewpoint was, if I could just get out of the district, the regions and international are easy. If I can just get out of the district, I mean, it was like, that's not the way it goes. It gets more difficult with each level. When they announced that this third place wasn't me, second place wasn't me, and they're announcing the winner, I was standing up at my table. I scooted my chair back, and I was standing up to go get my trophy, and it wasn't my name. And I sort of straightened my coat that I had on, scratched my back, sat back down. And I drove home, and like a lot of Toastmasters, I was pounding the steering wheel. I was really, really upset, and I'm saying these speech contests are stupid. I'm never competing again. This is too much to go through. Where do they get these people? If I could just get in front of an audience and had a high enough IQ to understand my brilliance, I'd be fine. Where do they find these people? And I got home and I was taking my tie off, and I'm looking at all the people I know in Toastmasters. I'm going, they're not an idiot. They're smart. And I have this realization, which it's going to be pretty hard to learn from my mistakes if I'm unwilling to admit that I'm making any.
So true.
And that's when my life turned around. And if that's all I got out of Toastmasters, if that's all I got out of the competition, that was worth the journey, because that changed my life dramatically, because I was very hard on myself when I didn't succeed at something. And when I didn't get the promotion, I was very hard on myself. And I beat myself up very bad. And that turned me around to the point that I had as much admiration for losing a speech contest as I did for winning it. And I was excited to lose it because if I lost it, I was going to discover a weakness I could fix. And it became a journey of learning instead of a journey of winning. And that was where things turned around for me in 2002. Came back in 2003, went over 1 second. Okay, cool. I know I can do this. Came back in 2004, needed a lesson in humility, lost a division or lost a division. Yeah. And then came back in 2005 and dusted mine. I actually started speaking professionally and all sorts of stuff. I was doing financial seminars at that point because I sort of went, we used to have a black badge. I go, I don't badges. I don't need a stupid badge. I'm going to go out and speak. I was wanting to win the competition so I could go speak professionally. I just got a job speaking, delivering financial seminars in the evenings and weekends, and I made pretty good money. It was only $300 a speech, but I was speaking 3 times a week,
Oh, wow.
and so it was like, okay, great. And I was out there speaking and earning some money and doing what I wanted. And then I came back around the next year and that's when I said, look, I get better every year. I can win this if I don't quit. Just focus on giving the best speech you can give. And when you lose it, find out why and correct that and you'll be better. And that became my model. But that's 2005 is when I just let go and said, win or lose, I'm gonna learn. And that's when I won it. So that's a long answer to your question, but that's really what the journey was.
So when you talk about when you lost, it's actually a learning curve. But here's my question, and again, brings back to, at least in my case, when I do a speech and I'm like, oh my God, this is perfect. And 2 years back, I started speaking during COVID time, and I had a mentor, and I was like, oh my God, I am so good. I rock at this. And then I coached with few world champions and some mentors at my club, and I realized I don't know so much that's about public speaking. And I've done mostly on Toastmasters, clubs, and events. So, my question to you would be, how is it different? Because somebody who wants to be a public speaker is not limited to Toastmaster, because eventually you want to build a career in it.
Right.
How is it different to speak on a Toastmasters podium versus outside Toastmaster? What's something that they should keep in mind, that okay, this is outside and this is something can be a game changer?
Okay, first of all, Toastmasters audiences are the most wonderful, warm, loving, accepting audiences you will ever speak in front of.
Totally.
So if you think I'm doing great in Toastmasters, well, yeah, you're talking to a bunch of people that want you to do great. Okay. And they're up there too, and they know what it's like and everything like that. When you speak, you out corporately or you go out in the public, you have people sitting in the audience that have all sorts of, first of all, you have some very accomplished people. They're like, oh, okay, who's this person? What do they have to say? They're evaluating. They don't necessarily respond nearly as well. And a lot of them don't understand what it's like to be a speaker up there. So the non-Toastmaster audiences, from my standpoint, they don't know that they don't react. And I had a time, I remember a lot of the speaking I've done it's been on a professional level, but it's been with organizations where I was speaking on behalf of the organization. So I was working with I was president of an international foundation that taught universal character and ethics programs. We had a little book called The Way to Happiness and had 21 chapters about, love and honor your parents and be trustworthy and things like that. Basic values in life. And I was at this big conference, and it was older people. And I got up there and started talking, and I went through the whole book and what was going on. They all sat there completely wooden the whole time. And I'm like, I hardly got any reactions out of them. And I just kept putting more energy into it and talking about it and was enthusiastic about my product. And I'm sitting there going, God, they hate me. They hate me. God, who signed me up for this group? And I got down and went down to my table. And I'm not kidding. There were 15 people that came over in a line wanting to get information and books. My grandkids need this. You can do this. So one of the things I want to say is you never know what's going on with the audience, because in Toastmasters, people know how to be a good audience. And outside of Toastmasters, they don't know how to be a good audience. And they may be having a great time, but they're sitting there going, that's just how they look. They don't realize that scowl that they're giving you, you see it. Okay. So, and on that, I always try to find a couple people that are smiling in the audience or something that I get some feedback from. And, but realize you never know what's going on in the mind of the audience.
So when you're faced with that kind of audience who are like, um, as a speaker, especially if somebody's a new speaker, it's very discouraging. And there are times, because it's not something, oh, you just came out of the mind and you wrote it. It's a practice speech. You've practiced this multiple times. Likely you might forget something. How do you recover from that point and say, okay, you know what? I'm going to get my audience at my next statement?
Yeah.
Because it's discouraging at the stage.
Look, here's the simplicity. Nobody learned to ride a bicycle by walking out in the driveway and getting on the bicycle and riding it the first time. That didn't happen. You fell off. Nobody learned the multiplication tables. And when I grew up, we had these little cards, 4x6 cards with 4x4, and you go through them. Nobody went through them the first time and learned them the first time. You have to get some experience under your belt. And one of the things I talk about is speaking's a muscle, and you have to exercise it. And nobody goes out and wins the 100-meter dash in the Olympics the first time they run. They train and they get up to it. And so you have to train. You have to have a training mindset that this is experience. And there's a quote, I think Will Rogers, a lot of people don't know who Will Rogers was, but he was a phenomenally philosophical cowboy from Oklahoma. But he said, good judgment comes from experience, and a lot of experience comes from bad judgment. So when you have bad judgment, you get experience. And I have to tell you, having lived a few years in life now, that's really sort of the story to my life. I know so much now because of the bad judgment I've had in the past and the experience I gained from that. And that's the same thing true with speaking. So what you have to do is take each one of them. I think anybody I talked to that's wanted to be a speaker, yeah, there's ups and downs, but we had a overriding drive that wanted to do it. And I've seen people in all sorts of professions from, I just had something, speaking, you were talking about the adventure stuff I do. I got my pilot's license when I was 19. I know people that started to fly and they quit. They never got their pilot's license. I'm an expert snow skier. I can ski anything on the mountain. And I remember, for years I fell and had snow down my neck and everything, along those lines. I've traveled all over the world. I've sailed all over the world. I've done things. I've made all sorts of mistakes in the process, but you gain the knowledge as you do it. And you have to have some drive or purpose that you want to continue. And if you don't have that and you just want to go out, give your first speech and everybody goes, oh, you're the most wonderful speaker in the world, we can't believe it. That's not going to happen. So you need to get over your own self-importance. And being a speaker is not about your importance, it's about the audience importance. It's how important is the audience. And you have to be grateful that people are willing to listen to you. And when I told you I lost that speech contest at that division level in 2004, I learned a lesson that I would never go back and win that contest and lose this lesson. And the lesson was I didn't respect my audience. And ever since then, whenever I stand in front of a group of people, they are the most important people in my life when I'm standing in front of them. And I'm so grateful that they're willing to take the time out of their day to listen to me and give me an opportunity to speak to them. My attitude before was, you're lucky that I'm here speaking to you. And that didn't go over well. As I say, that went over like a dead cat at a wedding. Okay.
Yes, I think when you uplift your audience, in return, they uplift you.
Mm-hmm. But the value is that your audience should be in a better condition after they hear you than before they heard you. They should be more enthusiastic or more interested in living life, or the definition of the word inspire means to breathe life into, as compared to expire, which means to take life out of. And it's funny because I just 2 weeks ago, I gave the inspirational message at my Rotary Club, and I talked about, people say, oh, Lance, you're a speaker. Are you an inspirational speaker? I said, whenever you speak, you should be inspirational because it means to breathe life into. As compared to, have you ever had a speaker inspire you? And everybody laughed. And then the speaker that got up at Rotary that day, I get all these texts, I'm being expired. He was an engineer and he just looked at his thing and showed his PowerPoints, and it was expiring. So, but no, your audience should be in a better condition, and that should be your goal, is to have them in a better condition after the speech than before the speech. So.
So I understand you say that we leave our audience in a better condition. How important it is to leave them with an action,
Well, here's the value of the
like a
speech.
follow-up action, or just leave
Yeah.
them with a message? What is more
Well,
important
here's
to
the
you?
value. Here's the value is how long does your message resonate with them? 3 minutes, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, or 30 years? Is it a message that they carry forward in their life that helps them from that point forward, or they remember it for 2 weeks and they forget about it? To me, the value of the message is how long does that person carry that piece of information you gave them. Now it depends, and Aisha, depends on what your speech is about. It could be an action, but it could also be an attitude. It could be a viewpoint on life. It depends what your speech is. It's not every speech doesn't need to lend in an action. Okay, that's we start to get formulaic at that point. But the whole idea of, let's just say that my speech is about the lessons are in the losing, and that when I lose, I discover what I need to learn. There's not necessarily an action in that, but there's an attitude when I run into something that doesn't work right. And stuff. I use that all the time in my life now since I had that realization. I get on the wrong road at the wrong time in LA and the traffic's horrible. And I go, I'm smarter now than I was a minute ago. I have to remember not to do this. Instead of going, oh, stupid, I shouldn't have gotten on. I go, make a note to self. Don't get on this freeway at this time. And I'm smarter now. I take that loss, that non-optimum result, and I apply it to to the next day. So whatever your message is, how long does it resonate with your audience? And we have people that have said stuff to us that we carry for a lifetime. And
Yes, we
we
do.
have a lot of people that say things to us, and it's like a self-erased message. As soon as we hear it, we erase the words. So that's my thing. Can you give them something that they'll carry with them for a while?
So, on the note where you said keeping a note that don't do it, if you were to pick three biggest don'ts on public speaking for our audience, what would those be?
The first one is let's sort of stick with the competition at this point, if that's okay. Okay.
Sure.
In general, first one is don't start with your message. A lot of people start with, what the most important thing in life is this, and then they try to explain that. That's like giving the punchline to your joke up front, and then you try to explain why that's funny. Okay, you need to start with a story that engages the audience and connects with them emotionally. Okay, and then there's a surprise aha moment, a surprise resolution, but it's all set up now. So when that message comes in, they're ready to receive it. And there's different types of speaking, and there's a form of speaking called speaking to inform. And in speaking to inform, you tell them what you're going to talk about. You tell them, then you tell them what you talked about. That's not speaking to inspire. And speaking to inspire, you need to engage the emotion. So don't start with your message up front. And there's probably 15 things. I'm just going to pick a couple. I don't recommend using quotes because I'm going to tell you how to do it if you do it. A lot of times people use quotes because they say, because Abraham Lincoln said, or because Gandhi said. And it's a little bit like saying, you won't believe me, but I'm going to bring Gandhi to the speech and you'll believe Gandhi because Gandhi said this, right? But you won't believe me. So when you do give a quote, and just in all the coaching I've had people that have given 8-10 quotes in a 7-minute speech. It's like, holy smokes. When you do give a quote, the quote should not go, let me tell you what Gandhi said, and it comes from Gandhi. I heard this quote from Gandhi, and when I heard that I needed to be the change I wanted to see in the world, this is what I realized about it. And then you give that quote to the audience from your perspective because you got it from Gandhi and you give it to them. You don't go, here's what Gandhi said, because you're making Gandhi the source of your speech. So you want to stay in the source of the speech. The last thing I'm going to say, little tip, we have this thing called a call to action at the end.
Yes.
And I see speakers do this all the time. let's just say they give a speech about fear and overcoming fear. And they were afraid, and this is a speech I coached one time. A guy was afraid to go out and play baseball in the street with the kids in the neighborhood. And he realized all the things he missed in life. And he was afraid to do these things. He was realizing all the things he missed, and he overcame his fear. And it was a great story up to that point. And then he looks at the audience and he goes, how many fears are you not confronting? How many things in your life are you not doing because of your fears? And it's like he took a 2x4 and he started whacking the crap out of the audience, commanding them to let go of their fears. And the thing is, none of us, this is the simplicity on that thing. There's this whole call to action. We feel like we have to tell the audience what to do. But the truth is, we haven't sat down and interviewed everybody in the audience and know what their issue is. We don't know what they've overcome. And I'll guarantee you, it happens in every audience I speak to. There are people in that audience that are smarter than I am. There are people in that audience that have endured more difficulties than I have. They have more experience than I have. But for me to stand up there and tell them what they need to do is disingenuous at best. So I feel the way that you get the audience to accept your message is to share with the audience. Don't tell the audience. Let's share and tell. Let's share. Share with the audience how you applied that message in your life and it made a difference in your life. And they're sitting there going, oh, wow, I could do that. And as soon as they say, I could do that, they're accepting your message of their own free will. They're not having it thrust upon them as a command. They're saying, I want that message. I could do that in my situation. And with that, I run into this with a lot of early speakers. They'll say, maybe there's that book you haven't written, or there's that trip you wanted to take, or that job you wanted to get. And they try to guess what the issue is with the audience member. They say, never do that. Let the audience, make it free so the audience member can pick their own item. Don't try to give the audience member their item. But that whole thing. So in the beginning, don't start with the message up front. Start with the story. And there's a whole way to tell the story. Don't bring in a lot of quotes. If you use a quote, say, when I heard that, this is what I realized. Make the quote come from you. And the last, share the application of the message and how that changed your life on it. And I even, at the end of my speech, a lot of the speech coaching I do, I'll say, and don't say, you need to do this. Say, maybe you know someone who, let's say, who's letting fear stop them. I don't know, maybe you know them really well. But maybe you know some, encourage them to do this. And the person goes, oh, yeah, I know them really well because I look in the mirror every day. This is Monday. Saturday, I taught 100 kids, high school, 120 high school kids. I did a communication seminar with them. And I did that. I said, I'm sure this hasn't happened to you, but does anybody in the room here know somebody that said something stupid and everybody laughed at them and all the hands went up? I didn't want to say that ever happened to you because I didn't want them to go. I said, did you know somebody that said something stupid? Does anybody here know somebody that had a really good idea, but they were afraid to say it and they kept it in their head and all the hands went up? Because I made it really safe for them to like go, it wasn't me, but I knew somebody that happened to. You know, little nuances like that on it. So anyway, those would be I think probably my 3 tips at this point. So I've got 50 more I could pick up. Those are the 3 I'll give.
I mean, I would love to learn all 50, but here's something I want to ask you. Just as in any profession, you need a coach who's done it, who knows the path, who can take you there. How important is coaching in public speaking, whether be it contest or a keynote speaker? What is the significance of it?
There's 2 sides to this. There's, I think you need effective feedback is the important thing. I think I said effective feedback on it. And I think if you're going to pick a coach, definitely pick one that has done what you're trying to do. And I see this a lot in the Toastmasters coaching where I get people that have been coached by people that have never even won a district level speech competition, and yet they're coaching people on what to do. And maybe they have some expertise outside of Toastmasters, but they've never competed and they've never done it. And then I have to unscramble all the stuff they put in their speeches because they don't know what that path is, you know. And on it, so if you pick a coach, pick someone who has experience in the area you're working with. But here's the double edge to for me, this is the double edge to having a coach. You can't lose yourself in getting coached and says, well, my coach says to do this, and you turn over your ownership, your authorship of what you're doing to the coach, and you're saying, well, the coach says to do this, so I'm going to be a winner. You have to own it 100%. Mm-hmm. And for me, my path to the world championship, I had a lot of feedback and a lot of coaching. I had very good people around me, but I did not have one coach that I said, here's my speech, tell me what I need to do.
Right.
I was watching, and that's one of the reasons I think it took me 13 years. I was watching, I was seeing what worked, what didn't work. I was applying that, I was trying it, I was failing at it, and I was getting feedback from good people, bits of feedback at different times. But I wanted, and here was the thing for me, Aisha, the journey for me to the world championship was not just about winning it. And I wanted to figure out, and this was told to me early in my Toastmasters career, when I asked, what's the world championship? The person who is a very well-known Toastmaster, is a founder of my club, one of the longest, most experienced women in Toastmasters, said, well, that's like you had 5 to 7 minutes to speak to the world. And my challenge with myself was, if something occurred where I had 5 to 7 minutes to speak to mankind, what would I say?
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, my first thought was pick somebody else. That's the first. I said, you need to pick somebody smart. Don't have me say it. And then I went, but that would just be a person just like me. Why is it I don't know what I would say to the world? And I wanted to figure out what my messages were. I wanted to figure out what my speaking style was. I wanted to figure out what my voice was. And I used this competition to help develop that so that I could figure that out and own it myself, that I had my own speaking style, and I'd been told my whole life what I needed to be. I wanted to figure out what I was. And I used this path to figure out what I was. I had phenomenal feedback and support around me, but I didn't have somebody feeding me what I needed to be. And that was my choice. And that's probably, quite honestly, I said, why I took as long as I did to, on the journey. But I would never, the joy, the learning, the experience was in that journey. It wasn't in standing there picking up the trophy at the end. It was getting to that place and owning it fully myself. So yes, get a coach, get good feedback. And most people in Toastmasters do not know how to write a good speech, and they don't know how to coach you properly. It's a learning by doing organization, and there's a lot of misinformation. And there's a lot of people that think they know, just like you thought you were a great speaker and then you got coached and you realize you didn't. There's a lot of people that think they know how to write a speech, and they're telling you what you need to do, and they have no idea. They have no clue as to what they're telling you. Because I listen to this stuff all the time, and I'm, like I said, at this point, what I've been in Toastmasters 33 years, and I don't know, I think I've done my third or fourth, level 5 thing in Pathways. I'm not a big fan of Pathways, but it's what I get to do right now. But I've got 34, 38 competent communicators. I'm a double DTM because I'm in my club. I'm always speaking, but it's now it's sort of like, I'll do a speech, and I kick them out. But the point is, I know what I'm doing, and I've got, right. So I listen to these other people and I go, they don't know what they're doing. Okay. So pick a coach that knows what they're doing, but you got to own it yourself. And everybody I coach, I go, this is your speech. I'm going to give you some suggestions. And one of the things I watch the body language of the person I'm coaching. And Verity talks about this because when we were working on her speech, we were really struggling with what her message was. And then we sort of hit on this thing about, write a new story. And she brightened up like a light bulb. And I knew we had it at that point because, you see, when you find the message in you, you light up. Because you finally found it. Your emotions, when you finally figure out, when I figured out I wanted to say, the only problem we have in the world is we seek to find what's wrong with each other instead of finding what's right with each other. I had this huge relief come off me. And I was driving down the street, pounding my steering wheel, going, what is it I want to say? I remember right where I was. And I said, the only problem we have in this world is we seek to find what's wrong with people instead of what's right with them. And I had this, it was like I was reborn. I was like, that's my message for the world. If we just saw what's right with people, all the problems would go away. And that's the message. I own that. That's not a cliche. That's what I try to live. Like you were saying, you do that. That came from my heart. And that came from my speaking center. When I found that, I could go to that center anytime and speak from it. But until I found it, I didn't know where that center was in me.
That is a beautiful message, and I hope and I that more and more people practice it. That cha-ching.
Thank you.
But since I also know you are a coach, um, so if you were to give a generic tip to our audience, what two tips you would leave them, say that you that's a must, whether it's in Toastmasters or outside Toastmaster, a keynote, that you must include this in your speech? What would be those two tips? I mean, if you want to be generous, you can make it three.
No, no, that's okay. Here's the point I get with that, Aisha, and to me, every speech is different, and it depends on the setting and the audience. And say you have to have this in a speech. What it does, it puts a sort of a rigid thing. You have to be in there. Here's what I would say. The two things I would say, and I said this already. You need to be yourself, and you need to just talk to the audience. And that means the hard part of that is don't stand on stage and turn into somebody else, and don't yell or tell the audience. Have a conversation with the audience and be relaxed, and be appreciative of the fact that they're willing to listen to you. Like I said, the best speakers I've ever heard I felt like I was just having a conversation with them on stage. I was just listening to a conversation with them. From that standpoint, there's a lot of mechanics as far as how to work a room. There's a lot of mechanics as far as what to open with, how to do transitions, how to tell a story sequence. There's all sorts of things that you have to know and be competent at. But if you go, the must I would have is be authentic to your message, be honest with the audience and authentic to your message, and respect them and talk to them as they're, as they are. Be appreciative in the fact that they're wonderful human beings that are willing to listen to you and share with them versus tell them. Those are the areas that I really, really work with. I just want to talk one other thing about coaching. I had won the speech evaluation contest in my district 3 times back in the 1990s, before my club was even a number 4 club. And I do think that if you want to be a great speaker, whether you coach professionally or not, you have to be a great speaking coach, because you have to be able to look at your own speeches and coach yourself. And what happened to me is I outperformed almost everybody in my circle as far as my coaching ability to look at my own speech. I would get feedback from people, and you'll get a lot of bad feedback. So I had to have a filter. I'd have a filter and go, did that make sense or does that make sense? And I would listen. The other thing I would look at, actually, I'm glad I'm glad I'm talking about this. I'll tell you what I teach I work with my students, or my coachees, I guess I would call them, on you go out and give your speeches at Toastmasters clubs, you'll get some of the worst advice in the world. And I've seen people take all the advice and try to change their speech, and they wind up in a padded cell, psychotic. So you got to be careful with that. But I said, what I look for consistency. If I go to 3 clubs, did I get consistent feedback on a point from the 3 clubs? And did that point make sense to me? And I got so much bad feedback, but I got so many jewels that I was able to sift through and go, that is a really important one. I've heard that 3 times now. I'm going to change that at that point. So I'm getting consistency on the feedback from that standpoint. And the other thing I would always do, I recommend, don't just let people evaluate you nilly-willy at a Toastmasters club if you're competing. I said there's 3 things I want you to look at. What did I do well? What worked for you? What did not work or you didn't think I did well? What was my message? Put those down. And so I actually I brought a sheet. I did well, worked, didn't do well, didn't work. What was my message? And they filled that out. Because all I wanted to know, I knew what my message was. Is there something in the way that I'm doing that's making it not get across? And then I could see that feedback. But when I just opened it up, one guy told me my tie was bad, and another guy told me there's this story about the guy throwing the starfish back in the sea, which is an old story. And I needed to put that in my speech. And I'm sitting there looking at him going, everybody knows that story. It's like the crazy things that were told to me, that I needed to do. But what you do, you just thank people, be very gracious, always respecting, always validate them for their feedback, and take the information. But here's the key. In order to be a good speaker, I think you need to be a good speaking coach, because you need to be able to evaluate your own work. That's the simplicity of what I'm trying to say here. So.
Thank you. That is a wonderful note to end on. To be a good speaker, you need to be a coach. And that's a wrap from our side. Thank you, Lance. It was wonderful having you.
It's great to be here. It's a fun conversation. I'm very busy in my life. It's really fun to be able to share this journey I had and hopefully help other people along the path so that they can have some of the wins and the gains that I had in my life that were so transformative for me as an individual. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share these things.
Thank you, Lance.